I never told anyone about this while it was happening, because I didn't want to sound dramatic. Working night shifts tend to make people think you're paranoid, like the darkness is playing tricks on your head. But what happened during those months wasn't paranoia. It was real, and to this day, I still think about how close I came to not making it out. I was 22 at the time and working the overnight shift at a small storage facility just outside of town. It wasn't one of those massive, brightly lit places with security guards and patrol cars. This place was old, quiet, and cheap, which meant it attracted a certain type of customer. My job was simple: sit in a small office from 9 p.m. to 5 a.m., monitor the security cameras, and occasionally unlock the gate for customers who forgot their access codes. Most nights were painfully boring. I'd bring a thermos of coffee, listen to podcasts, and scroll on my phone. The office was basically a glass box with a desk, a chair, and a bank of monitors mounted to the wall. Outside, long rows of metal storage units stretched into the darkness, illuminated by flickering yellow lights that buzzed loudly when the wind picked up. For the first few weeks, nothing happened. Then one night, around 1:30 a.m., I noticed movement on one of the cameras. A man was walking slowly down one of the aisles between the storage units. That wasn't unusual by itself. Some people worked late or traveled at odd hours, but something about the way he moved made me pause the podcast and lean forward in my chair. He wasn't heading toward a specific unit. He was just walking, slowly, stopping every few feet, looking around. I watched him for a solid minute before he glanced up directly at the camera. That was the first time my stomach dropped. Most people don't even notice the cameras, let alone look straight into them. But he did, and when he did, he smiled. Not a friendly smile, more like he was acknowledging me, like he knew I was watching. A few seconds later, the office door opened. I jumped, my heart pounding, and looked up to see the same man standing just inside the doorway. He was tall, maybe late 30s, wearing a dark hoodie and jeans that looked like they hadn't been washed in weeks. His eyes immediately locked onto mine. "Hey," he said, his voice calm. Too calm. Gate wouldn't open. I forced myself to relax and asked for his unit number. He gave it to me without hesitation, like he'd rehearsed it. I typed it into the system and buzzed the gate open. "Thanks," he said, still smiling. He didn't leave right away. He just stood there, looking around the office. "You work here alone?" he asked casually. I hesitated before answering. "Yeah, just nights." He nodded slowly, like that was exactly the answer he'd hoped for. After he left, I told myself I was overthinking it. Some people were just weird. That was it. But then he started showing up every night. Always between 1 and 2 a.m. Always alone. Sometimes he'd open his unit and just stand there, staring into the darkness inside like he'd forgotten what he came for. Other times, he'd walk the property aimlessly, never taking his eyes off the cameras when he passed beneath them. Once, I watched him walk up to another customer's unit and tug on the handle. That's when I started locking the office door. I mentioned him to my manager the next day, but she brushed it off. "As long as he's paying and not breaking anything, there's nothing we can do." A week later, things escalated. It was raining hard that night, the kind of rain that makes everything sound louder and closer than it really is. Around 2 a.m., I heard a knock on the office door. I checked the monitor first. It was him. I cracked the door just enough to talk through it. "What's up?" I asked. He leaned forward slightly. "You mind if I come in? Just want to get out of the rain for a minute." Company policy said no customers inside after hours. I told him that. His smile faded for the first time. "I just need to talk," he said. "You don't have to be scared." That sent a chill straight through me. "I'm fine," I replied. "I can help you from here." He stared at me for a long moment, then nodded and stepped back. I locked the door and watched him on the cameras as he walked away. But instead of going back to his unit, he stopped in a dark corner where none of the lights worked. And he stayed there. For almost an hour. I could barely see him, just a vague silhouette leaning against a unit. Every time I checked the camera, he was still there, completely motionless. Eventually, he disappeared from view. I didn't relax until my shift ended. The next night, I brought a pocket knife. Around 3 a.m., the power flickered. The monitors went black for a second before coming back on. When they did, my heart nearly stopped. He was standing right outside the office door. I hadn't seen him approach. He knocked once. Softly. I know you're in there, he said quietly. I can hear you breathing. I froze. I just want to make sure you get home safe tonight, he continued. It's dangerous out there this late. That's when I called the police. As I spoke to the dispatcher, he began knocking harder, then pounding. His calm voice turned into angry muttering, words I couldn't quite make out, except for one phrase he kept repeating. Should have let me in. By the time officers arrived, he was gone. They searched the property, but didn't find him. They told me to be careful and left. I didn't quit immediately. I needed the money. But after that night, every sound felt amplified. Every shadow felt closer. 2 weeks later, on my last shift, I was walking to my car, just before dawn when I heard footsteps behind me. Slow, deliberate. I didn't turn around. I got into my car, locked the doors, and looked up. He was standing behind my vehicle, smiling at me through the rear window. I drove off without looking back. I quit that morning. I still don't know who he was or what he wanted. But sometimes when I check my rearview mirror at night, I swear I see that same smile staring back at me. I used to think overnight retail was safer than most night jobs. You're inside a building, surrounded by lights, cameras, and thick glass. It's not like walking dark streets or working alone in some remote location. That belief didn't survive my first winter working the graveyard shift at a 24-hour pharmacy. The store sat on the edge of town near a highway exit. During the day, it was busy, loud, and forgettable. At night, it turned into something else entirely. From midnight until sunrise, we mostly got truckers, insomniacs, and the occasional person who clearly didn't want to be home. There were 2 of us scheduled overnight, me and a cashier named Aaron. Around 2 a.m., he'd disappear in the back room to do inventory while I handled the front. That left me alone at the register, staring through the glass doors at an empty parking lot illuminated by buzzing white lights. The first time I noticed a man, it was just after 1 a.m. He didn't come inside. He just stood near the entrance, pretending to check his phone. I didn't think much of it until I realized he'd been there for almost 15 minutes. Not pacing, not walking, just standing in the same spot, occasionally glancing up at the store. Eventually, he came in. He was maybe mid-40s, wearing a heavy coat despite it not being that cold. He walked slowly down each aisle, taking his time, picking up random items and putting them back. When he reached the counter, he placed a single bottle of water down. As I rang it up, I noticed he wasn't looking at the card reader or the price display. He was watching my reflection in the security mirror behind me. Quiet night, he said. Usually is, I replied, trying to keep things casual. He smiled, nodded, and left. I forgot about him until the next night. Same time, same routine, standing outside, one item purchase, watching me the entire time. By the 3rd night, it stopped feeling like a coincidence. On the 4th night, he asked my name. I didn't give it to him. He laughed softly, like that was amusing to him. That's okay, he said. I'll figure it out. That's when I told Aaron about him. Aaron shrugged and said, as long as he's not stealing, there's nothing we can really do. A few nights later, the man came in during Aaron's break. The store felt emptier than usual. The hum of the refrigerators and the buzz of the lights felt louder. This time, he didn't buy anything. He stood at the end of the counter, leaning slightly forward. You always look tired, he said. You should get more sleep. My skin prickled. Is there something you need? He shook his head slowly. Just checking on you. When he left, I locked the door behind him for a few seconds longer than necessary, just to breathe. After that, he stopped coming inside. Instead, he waited in his car. Every night, same spot, same dark sedan, engine off, lights off, just sitting there, facing the entrance. I mentioned it to the overnight manager, but she said unless he did something illegal, there was nothing to report. One night, around 3:30 a.m., the phone rang. I answered it. Silence. Then breathing. Slow. Heavy. Hello. I said. The breathing stopped. The line went dead. I checked the caller ID. No number. I looked up at the parking lot. The sedan's headlights were on. I watched as the car slowly pulled closer to the entrance, stopping just short of the doors. I called Aaron to come up front. He stood beside me as we watched the man step out of the car and walk up to the glass. He pressed his forehead against it. I just want to talk, he mouthed. We didn't open the door. He stayed there for nearly 20 minutes before leaving. That should have been the end of it. It wasn't. A week later, I got off my shift early due to a schedule change. The parking lot was still dark when I walked to my car. As I unlocked the door, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned around. It was him. Up close, his smile looked forced. Too wide. "I didn't expect to see you out here alone," he said. My heart hammered. "You need to step away from me." He raised his hand slightly. "Relax. I just wanted to walk you to your car." "I'm fine," I said, getting inside and locking the doors. He stood there watching as I drove away. The next morning, I found a note tucked under my windshield wiper. "You forgot this." There was nothing attached. I didn't go to work that night. When I returned 2 days later, Aaron told me something that made my blood run cold. The man had come in asking for me by name. My full name. I called the police that night and filed a report. They said without a direct threat, there wasn't much they could do. 3 nights later, during my shift, the power went out. Emergency lights flickered on, casting long shadows across the store. The doors rattled. Someone was pulling on them. Through the dim glass, I saw his face, smiling. "I told you I'd figure it out," he said. The police arrived before he got inside. They arrested him for trespassing and harassment. I quit 2 days later. I still avoid night stores. Still double-check my locks. Because sometimes, when I'm alone in a quiet parking lot, I feel like someone is watching me, waiting for the lights to go out. I took the job because it paid more than anything else I could find at the time. No experience required, overnight hours, minimal supervision. Those should have been red flags, but when you're broke and desperate, you ignore a lot of things you shouldn't. The job was at a small industrial laundry facility that serviced hospitals and hotels. During the day, dozens of people worked there, loading massive machines and moving carts stacked with linens. At night, though, it was just me and one other employee, an older guy named Ron who worked the opposite end of the building. The shift ran from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. The building itself was huge, windowless, and loud. Even when the machines were off, the place never truly felt quiet. Pipes rattled. Air vents hissed. Somewhere deep in the building, something always hummed. Ron and I barely spoke. He stayed near the loading dock, smoking and listening to the radio. I worked in the main processing area, folding clean linens and stacking them onto carts. We were separated by distance and noise, which meant that for most of the night, I felt completely alone. About a month into the job, I started noticing things that didn't make sense. It began with footsteps, not Ron's. His boots were loud and uneven, easy to recognize. These footsteps were softer, slow, always stopping when I stopped. The first time it happened, I assumed I was imagining it. Long nights mess with your head. But when it kept happening night after night, I started paying closer attention. One night, around 2 a.m., I turned off my machine and stood completely still. So did the footsteps. My chest tightened. I waited a full minute before moving again. As soon as I took a step, the footsteps resumed, trailing me from somewhere beyond the rows of machines. I called out to Ron. No answer. I found him later near the dock, swearing he hadn't left his spot all night. A week later, I found a cart moved. I was meticulous about how I stacked things. I knew exactly where I left everything. But when I came back from the bathroom, one of the carts was closer to my station than before. Ron denied touching it. After that, I started locking the bathroom door behind me, even though no one ever tried the handle. Things escalated on a Tuesday night. I was folding sheets when I noticed one of the emergency exit doors was slightly open. That door was never open during shifts. It triggered an alarm if used, but the alarm wasn't going off. I stared at it for a long time before slowly walking over and pushing it closed. As soon as it latched, I heard a laugh. Quiet. Close. Right behind me. I spun around, heart pounding, but there was no one there. Just rows of metal machines and hanging shadows. I told Ron we needed to call the supervisor. He laughed it off and said the place was old and creepy, that noises were normal. That night, I stayed close to him. The next night, Ron didn't show up. No call. No warning. I was alone. I considered leaving, but I needed the money, and the supervisor assured me Ron was probably sick. Around 1:45 a.m., I saw a movement near the far end of the building. At first, I thought Ron had come in late. Then I realized the figure was too thin, too tall. It stood partially hidden behind a machine, watching me. I froze. After a few seconds, it stepped back out of sight. I grabbed my phone and called my supervisor. No answer. I tried Ron. Straight to voicemail. That's when I noticed something on one of the folding tables. A glove. Not one of ours. It was leather. Old. Sitting neatly in the center of the table, like it had been placed there intentionally. I backed toward the exit, keeping my eyes on the rows of machines. That's when the lights flickered. They didn't go out completely, just enough to make the shadows shift and stretch unnaturally across the floor. I heard footsteps again. Fast this time. I ran. I didn't know where I was going. I just ran, pushing past carts and machines, heart pounding so hard it hurt. Somewhere behind me, something crashed to the floor. Don't run. A man's voice called out calmly. You'll hurt yourself. I reached the loading dock and slammed the door shut behind me, locking it. I grabbed a metal pole leaning against the wall and held it in both hands, shaking. I could hear him on the other side of the door, breathing. Slow, patient. You work hard, he said. I've been watching you. That's when I realized the truth. He hadn't just been there that night. He'd been there for weeks, maybe longer. The door handle rattled, then stopped. I stood there for nearly an hour before police arrived. I don't remember calling them, but I must have. They searched the building and found nothing, except the glove. They told me they'd patrol the area more often. Ron never came back. Neither did I. A month later, I heard from another former employee that a man had been arrested for breaking into industrial buildings nearby and living inside them undetected. When I saw his mugshot online, my stomach dropped. It was the same man. I still dream about that building sometimes. About footsteps stopping when I stop. Waiting. I always thought working nights at a place that stayed open to the public was safer than being completely alone. There were cameras everywhere, bright lights, and at least the possibility that someone could walk in if things went wrong. That belief is the only reason I accepted the night shift job at a 24-hour gas station just off the interstate. The station sat between a diner and a closed-down car wash. During the day, it was busy nonstop. At night, though, traffic slowed to a trickle. Mostly truckers, the occasional drunk college kid, and people who looked like they didn't want to go home yet. My shift ran from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. Between midnight and 4, I was usually alone. The assistant manager would disappear into the back room to do paperwork or nap in his car, which technically wasn't allowed, but everyone knew it happened. That left me at the register, staring through thick, bulletproof glass at the pumps outside. The first time I noticed the man, it was around 2 a.m. He didn't pull up to a pump. He just parked crooked near the edge of the lot and sat in his car with the engine running. I noticed because his headlights were off, but his brake lights kept flickering on and off like he couldn't decide whether to leave. I watched him through the security monitor for a few minutes, then went back to my phone. 10 minutes later, he was still there. Eventually, he came inside. He was tall, thin, and wore a dark baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. He walked slowly, dragging his feet slightly as he approached the counter. Evening, I said. He didn't respond right away. Instead, he looked around the store, paying particular attention to the cameras mounted in each corner. You work here alone? He asked. I lied. No. He smiled faintly. That's good. He bought a pack of gum and left. I thought that would be the end of it. The next night, he came back. Same parking spot. Same behavior. This time, he bought nothing. He stood at the counter and stared at me through the glass. You look tired, he said. Long nights. I nodded, uncomfortable. You should be careful, he added. This place gets quiet. When he left, I told myself I was being dramatic. But deep down, something felt wrong. Over the next week, he showed up every other night. Sometimes he'd buy something small. Other times, he'd just stand there and ask questions that felt too personal. What time I got off, whether I lived nearby, whether I ever got scared working nights. One night, the assistant manager didn't show up at all. I was completely alone. Around 3:30 a.m., the man parked again. This time, he didn't come inside. He walked around the side of the building. My heart started racing. I watched the cameras as he moved out of view. A minute later, I heard a soft knock. Not on the front door, but on the side window near the restroom. I ignored it. Then it came again. Louder. Hey, his voice called from outside. Doors locked. The side door was always locked at night. He knew that. I'll be right with you, I called, staying behind the glass. I don't want to go around front, he said. Just open this one. No, I replied. There was a long pause. Then he laughed. I watched on the monitor as he stepped back from the window and disappeared again. A few minutes later, the front door rattled violently. He was pulling on it hard. "You said you weren't alone," he shouted. "I know you lied." I reached for the phone and dialed the police. As it rang, I saw his face appear inches from the glass. His expression had completely changed. Gone was the casual curiosity. In its place was pure anger. "I just want to talk," he said, pounding the glass. "Open the door." The dispatcher answered. The man backed away slowly, hands raised, smiling again like he hadn't just been trying to force his way in. Then he turned and walked to his car, driving off calmly. The police arrived 20 minutes later. They took a report, but said unless he came back, there wasn't much they could do. I finished my shift shaken, but unharmed. 2 nights later, my manager asked me to cover an extra overnight shift. I said no. He convinced me anyway. At 4 a.m., the power went out. Emergency lights kicked on, bathing the store in dim red light. That's when I heard footsteps. Not outside, inside, from a back hallway. I froze behind the counter. A shadow moved past the end of the aisle. "Hey," the man's voice said calmly. "You didn't think I'd forget you, did you?" I screamed and ducked down as the sound of glass shattering echoed through the store. The police arrived quickly this time. They arrested him hiding behind the dumpsters outside, bleeding from his hand. I quit that morning. I still get gas during the day now. I don't trust bright lights at night anymore. Because sometimes safety is just an illusion. I took the night security job because it was advertised as quiet. No customers, no coworkers, just rounds, cameras, and time to think. After months of chaotic retail work, that sounded perfect. The location was a municipal water treatment facility on the outskirts of town. It sat behind a tall chain-link fence topped with barbed wire, surrounded by empty land in every direction. During the day, engineers and city workers came and went. At night, the place was locked down. My shift ran from midnight to 8 a.m. There were 2 security guards scheduled overnight, but we worked separate zones. My partner, a guy named Lewis, stayed in the main control building. I was responsible for the outer perimeter, fence lines, pump houses, and storage buildings. The rules were simple. If anything looked off, call it in. Do not investigate alone. The first few weeks were exactly as promised. I did my rounds, checked locks, watched the cameras, and listened to the wind whip across the empty fields. Sometimes deer set off motion sensors. Sometimes raccoons knocked over trash cans. Nothing more. Then one night, a gate alarm went off. It was the service gate on the far west side of the property, the one that was never used. I pulled it up on the camera feed. The gate was open. That alone was strange. The alarm only triggered if it was physically moved. Wind couldn't do it. I radioed Lewis. He said he hadn't touched it and that the system showed no authorized access. Protocol said to wait for backup. I didn't. I grabbed my flashlight and drove the patrol cart out toward the gate. As I got closer, I noticed something that made my stomach tighten. The gate wasn't forced. It had been unlocked properly. Someone had a key. I locked the gate again and radioed Lewis to log it. He told me to head back to my zone and not worry about it. I tried to listen. An hour later, another alarm went off. This time, it was motion inside one of the pump houses. I checked the camera. The image was grainy, but I could clearly see movement inside. Not an animal. A person. I felt my mouth go dry. No one was supposed to be on site. I radioed Lewis again. Static. No response. Against my better judgment, I went to the pump house. The door was ajar. I stood outside for a long moment, flashlight shaking slightly in my hand. "Security," I called out. "Identify yourself." Silence. I pushed the door open. Inside, the air was damp and smelled like metal and chemicals. My flashlight beam swept across pipes, gauges, and concrete walls. Then it landed on footprints. Wet footprints leading deeper into the building. I heard breathing. Slow. Controlled. "Lewis," I called, already knowing it wasn't him. Something shifted behind the machinery. I backed out immediately and slammed the door shut, locking it from the outside. I radioed for police backup. That's when I heard the voice. "Don't call anyone." It came from inside the pump house. My heart slammed against my ribs. "I just need a place to stay," the man continued calmly. "You don't need to make this a big thing. I ran. I didn't look back until I reached the control building. Lewis was there, pale and shaken. He told me he'd heard footsteps outside earlier. Heavy ones. Too many for one person. The police arrived within 15 minutes and searched the facility. They found sleeping bags, food wrappers, and tools hidden in multiple buildings. The man was gone. A week later, he was caught living inside an abandoned filtration tunnel under the facility. The police said he'd been there for months, watching, learning schedules, finding keys. I quit the job that same day. Now, whenever I pass restricted areas with fences and warning signs, I think about how thin the line really is between secure and completely vulnerable. Because sometimes the most dangerous people are the ones who already know how to get inside.